French is on the decline in Quebec. How many times have you heard the current government say that? Many times, right? And the CAQ has used that to justify limiting immigration and raising tuition for international and out-of-province students. But is it really true? Is the French language in peril? Well, experts say it depends how you look at it. Jean-Pierre Corbeil is definitely an expert. He's an adjunct professor in the Department of Sociology at Laval University, also former head of language statistics program at Statistics Canada. On top of that, he has a new book coming out November 13th. It's called Le Français en déclin, repenser la francophonie québécoise. So in English, that is French in decline, rethinking Quebec's francophonie. Jean-Pierre Corbeil joins us now. Thanks for your time today.
Good afternoon, Natasha.
So this question and it's funny because even just saying question, I feel like this government treats it like a statement. There's no question. It's a statement for them. But this question of French being in decline, because I think we do need to question it. You say it really boils down to who is considered to be francophone. So who in that context is considered to be francophone, Monsieur Corbeil?
That's a very good question. Actually, what's interesting also, you mentioned the title of our book, and we shouldn't forget the question mark, because it says French in decline, question mark, rethinking the Quebec francophonie. Well, basically, and you mentioned it, everyone is talking with the decline of French in Quebec and Montreal in particular. 5 years ago, we already talked about the expression decline of French, whereas today we use we use it a lot without trying to explain or understand what we are talking about. We talk about the decreasing number of francophones, the increasing number of anglophones and allophones, and in fact, without really questioning how these terms resonate in the daily lives of many Quebecers. We often hear about linguistic roots, but rarely about the use of French in various spheres of the public space by people for whom French is their second or third language. So basically, it shouldn't be so much about how many anglophones, francophones, or allophones, but how many people and when or where do they use French overall? And so we hope that our book contributes to the public debate and reflection on the situation and future of the French language. First, certainly by recognizing the significant progress that the French language has made in Quebec over nearly 50 years, particularly among the immigrant population, the entire population who do not have French as their first language. And secondly, by acknowledging that up until the 2016 census, French had remained relatively stable in the public space and had even seen its use increase at work on an equal footing with English among workers, for instance, whose first language is not French. So basically, our book, above all, asks the question of how we should measure the evolution of the situation of French in Quebec and what are the diversified ways of contributing to the Quebec francophonie, even if one does not speak French most often at home.
I have to tell you, I really appreciate that you highlighted that question mark, because that as I said, that the question of French being in decline is exactly that, a question, and that's what this conversation is all about and what the book is all about. The question mark, I've never seen punctuation play a more important role, so I appreciate that you highlighted that, because part of what irks me so much is that I feel like, again, it is a statement, not a question here. And so, French language minister Jean-François Roberge, we know he said, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically that French is going the wrong way in Quebec and particularly in Montreal. And he says those are facts. But it sounds to me, when we know that more people have command of the French language actually than ever before, it's the right kind of French according to this government. So is that really the statement here, Mr. Corbeil, that the right kind of French according to them is on the decline?
Well, when we see the right
I hate
type
that,
of
yeah.
kind of, in fact, there are several ways, right, to talk about the linguistic situation in Quebec. This diversity of perspectives, opinions, and points of view depends largely, and you mentioned it earlier, on the statistical indicators that we use to talk about the presence and use of French. For example, do we talk about French as a mother tongue, as the language spoken most often at home, or do we talk about its use at work in public spaces languages, etc. We often tend to talk about the decline of French by using the mother tongue and the main language used at home criteria, but Quebec's language policy essentially focuses on its use in public spaces with people other than one's family and friends. But that's not to say that there aren't challenges and issues. Far from there. French is and always will be a fragile language in Canada and throughout North America. We must protect it. We must embrace it. We must also recognize and accept that many Quebecers are concerned about the fragility of French vis-a-vis the tide of globalization and the hegemony and growth of English as a lingua franca in the world. Especially since the 2016 census, migratory factors have had a strong influence on the growth of English unilingualism, particularly in Montreal, and the use of English only in public spaces. But the key question is, what can be done about it? And I think that our book provides a certain number of elements of response, and we hope invites more dialogue and the search for solutions and collaboration and partnerships. Acknowledging that there are issues and challenges with the presence and use of French as a common public language, particularly since the 2016 census, does not mean that we must correct the situation by closing in on oneself, by using coercive measures and excluding any productive dialogue, which risk leading to a feeling of exclusion and discrimination among many Quebecers.
Yeah, because that is just simply not productive. And then when we think about the situation that's going on right now with the tuition hikes for out-of-province and international students, again, it's just so unwelcoming. Now, I know those meetings have taken place. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be speaking with Graham Carr from Concordia University, the vice chancellor there. But what we've heard in the news, Mr. Corbeil, is that they basically went to the premier with a deal. And part of that deal is promoting French from within those Anglophone universities. So through programs, through some funding. Will that help, or do you think this government is not so open to that simply because the idea is it's still people coming from elsewhere?
Well, actually, I hope that we will have more and more dialogue. I personally think that rather than erecting barriers and obstacles, rather than antagonizing linguistic groups, one must work on the invitation and proposal to work together. And so while respecting individual choices and rights, one should aspire to have all Quebecers share responsibility for the future of the French language as a common public language in this province. But it being understood, obviously, that for many of them, French is a second or even a third language, and English is not a foreign language in this province, and is somehow also a part of who we are as Quebecers. So I think our book wishes to, or has the objective to invite to more dialogue, and I think that a more complex, more diverse, less monolithic, if you want, a less pessimistic portrait of the presence and use of French is needed. And I think we need to provide a more nuanced portrait of the situation of French and the Francophonie than that portrayed by many allies, observers, and politicians nowadays. And it's not in working against the English-speaking population that we're going to succeed in preserving and promoting French. So our book basically is the result of a collective of about 30 researchers who really care about the vitality and future of French language in Quebec, but who certainly wish to present another portrait of the linguistic situation in the province.
Right, and one that might be more effective, more productive. That book is Le Français en déclin, a question mark, Repenser la francophonie québécoise. Jean-Pierre Corbeil is one of the authors and an adjunct professor in the Department of Sociology at Laval University. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Natasha. Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.